Dixie here. I know I've talked a lot about thru hiking, specifically on the Triple Crown trails here in the United States, known as the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail. But I also realize that not everybody who's interested in backpacking has 5 to 6 months to dedicate to hiking one of these trails, let alone up to a year and a half to do all three. So I wanted to talk today about some of my favorite sections on these trails that I think could be done in about a week-ish, depending on your pace. It was really hard for me to say what sections were my absolute favorites because I really love several areas on all of these trails for different reasons. So some of the things I focused on when choosing these sections are, of course, the distance from point A to point B, areas where you could have lodging, parking, food, and an airport kind of nearby within a reasonable distance. Before I get started on the list, I want to say that all of the mile markers I give you today are going to be in Guthook Miles. That's the app that I highly recommend that you use if you're going to do any section on the AT, PCT, or CDT. It's just a great tool for navigation. Also, hikers can share information about trail conditions, water sources, you can see the elevation profile, etc. So if you have that app and you purchase a certain section, then you're going to be able to know the exact waypoint that I'm talking about when I talk about mile markers today. And without further delay, let's start from west and go to east. So first up is the Pacific Crest Trail, which many of you know spans 2,650 miles from Mexico to Canada through California, Oregon, and Washington. This trail was real tough because everything, in my opinion, on the Pacific Crest Trail for the most part is beautiful. If you're gonna hike one of these Triple Crown trails and see the most beauty that you can, it's gonna be the Pacific Crest Trail, in my opinion. Many of you are probably thinking that I'm gonna say the Sierra Nevada because most people know that's one of the cream of the crop areas, and you're kind of right in that. My suggestion today, though, actually isn't in the heart of the Sierra. It's considered the Northern Sierra, and in the Guthook app, it's considered Northern California. So my first suggestion today is from Echo Lake at mile 1092.3 near Highway 50 up to Donner Summit at mile 1157, which is near I-80. This makes for a total of 64.7 miles. Some of the perks of this section include the Desolation Wilderness, Lake Aloha, which I could sit by for hours. It's one of my most favorite lakes on the Pacific Crest Trail. And then there is Donner Pass, which, if you get into history, that's where the Donner Party had to overwinter in 1847, and there was some cannibalism that occurred, but that is the area where they got stuck and all of that happened. So it's beautiful, it's historic, and while it is a challenging section, you've got some climbs and you go up to elevations of almost 9,000 feet, it's not as challenging, in my opinion, as the rest of the Sierra, but you still get the Sierra feel. For traveling to and from in this section, Reno Airport is about an hour and a half from the Echo Lake Chalet, which is right there where this starts. So you could fly in, rent a car, drive there, stop at the South Lake Tahoe Harrah's Casino and hit up the buffet so you can calorie load before your hike. I'm not sure if Echo Lake Chalet allows extended parking. You can find out about that. But from that point, go up north to Donner Summit area. Just a few miles before you get to Donner Summit, there is Donner Pass, and just a little bit off trail there's Donner Ski Ranch if you're looking for some food right before you get done. But once you get to Donner Summit, it looks like there is a shuttle service that you can arrange for through dirtygypsyadventures.com. It looks like they'll do some shuttling from there to even Truckee, South Lake Tahoe. So anyway, you can just kind of figure out the details from there, but those are some options. And there probably are other shuttle services too. Another section that I would highly recommend on the Pacific Crest Trail is from Snoqualmie Pass to Stevens Pass. So from mile 2,393.9 to 2,464.8 for a total of a 70.9 mile stretch. In this area, it is wilderness. You're not going to cross over a road. So when you go in at point A, there are no bailouts. You got to make it to point B. This might not be a great idea for somebody who's going on their first overnight trip, but for those of you who do have a little bit of experience, this is a really great section. It's beautiful views all around. When you first head out of Snoqualmie Pass, you're going to go over the Kendall Catwalk, which is well known for locals that'll go up there for a day hike and turn around and come back. So there's a day hike option in this. There are a lot of lakes that you'll see. You're on the spine of the Cascades. It's just a section that I truly enjoyed, even though I had a mishap my first time leaving Snoqualmie Pass and had to turn back around and come back the second time. But I was glad for that, because the first time over the Kendall Catwalk, I couldn't see anything, and the second time it had cleared up. Doing this section will also allow you to try out one of my favorite food spots, and that's at Snoqualmie Pass. It's way more than a food truck, but that's what some people who don't know would call it. But it's called the Aardvark there, and there's this really cool guy named Dan who runs the place. So if you stop by there, say hello to him from Dixie, tell him I sent you. The food is wonderful. It's just not what you would expect from a little place sitting outside in a gas station parking lot. There's a place to stay there at the Summit Inn if you wanted to stay the night before heading out. Then once you arrive at Stevens Pass on the northern end, if you go east, there's a town called Leavenworth if you just want to do some extra sightseeing, but it's modeled after a Bavarian town. They've got some pretty good food there. It's a little touristy, but I think it's worth the visit if you're in the area. As far as travel goes in this section, you can fly into Seattle, rent a car, and I'm sure somebody there at Snoqualmie Pass would be happy to let you park. Or through Googling, it looked like you could probably find some sort of transportation from Seattle to Snoqualmie Pass. And then once you finish up at Stevens Pass, probably some sort of shuttle services that you could get back to Seattle to fly out. So you might not even need to rent a car in this section. There's always the old thumb, but once you're getting into a bigger city like Seattle, it's a little sketchy to me. There is also the option of being able to take an Uber from Seattle to Snoqualmie Pass. I'm not sure if you can beckon one once you're at Stevens Pass from Seattle. Not sure if that's going to be a little pricey. Another option for a lot of these more remote areas is getting on some of the pages of the Pacific Crest Trail, whether you're on the thru hiking class of whatever the current year is, or just the Pacific Crest Trail group in general. But a lot of times if you throw out, hey, I'm willing to pay somebody that lives in the area to drive me from Stevens Pass back to Snoqualmie or back to Seattle, or whatever shuttle you need, then a lot of times folks are willing to do it, for a fee. But there are some little local shuttle services in the area that might not be advertised otherwise, or just enthusiasts who are willing to help a fellow hiker out. Now, with that, it's up to you to vet this person through the internet and make sure that they are safe enough to be in a vehicle with. So a word of caution on that. Moving east, let's talk about some sections on the Continental Divide Trail, which spans about 3,000 miles along the Continental Divide from Mexico to Canada. And the first section I want to suggest on this trail is in Colorado, because Colorado to me is all around, in my opinion, the most gorgeous state along the Continental Divide Trail. The section I'm suggesting starts just north of Breckinridge at the Gold Hill Trailhead parking area at mile 1233.5, and this section will span north to Grays Peak Trailhead parking area at 1281.5 for a total of 48 miles. I know I've said that the other sections I suggested were pretty, but this one, in my opinion, is epic, because you go over Grays Peak, which is a 14,000 footer mountain, the highest point on the Continental Divide Trail, and right there near it, if you want to go ahead and knock out two while you're there, is Torrey's Peak. You're probably going to see a lot of mountain goats in this section, and you're probably going to want to crap your pants when you go from Mount Edwards. It's over 13,000 feet along the saddle to Grays Peak, which is again over 14,000 feet. If you're afraid of heights, this might not be the stretch of trail for you, because it is on a little spine, and I'm not really that afraid of heights, but I was pretty nervous going along this path. I was fine. You know, I never really felt like I was in serious danger, except for when a lightning storm kind of rolled in. So you definitely want to make sure that you're hitting the Grays Peak area in the morning when you go through this stretch. It's just common to have afternoon storms and showers in the mountains. Grays Peak is also something that you could do as a day hike if you're not quite ready for those overnight trips yet, or you could make kind of an in and out trip of it and just have, you know, maybe 2 nights out instead of the whole stretch, and you could really do that for any of these sections I'm going to suggest today. As far as travel goes, this one's a little far from the airport, but from Denver to Silverthorne, it's about 2 hours, so you could take a rental car to there. I know in the Silverthorne area there is Uber, so you might could talk an Uber driver into following you to park your car at the Grays Peak parking area and then Uber down to Breckinridge. It can get a little expensive, but a lot of these ski areas will have shuttle services or taxi services, but where there's a will, there's a way. Next on the Continental Divide Trail, I want to suggest another section, this time in Wyoming, and I know a lot of you are thinking, oh my gosh, the Wind River Range. I'm actually not going to suggest that. While it is arguably the most beautiful stretch of trail on the whole Continental Divide Trail, and in my opinion, definitely in Wyoming, my actual favorite part of the trail in Wyoming was in Yellowstone. So for this section, I'm recommending a starting point at the Heart Lake Trailhead parking area at mile 1991.6 to the Old Faithful Village at 2016.6 for a total stretch of 25.6 miles. Now, from the Old Faithful area, there is a boardwalk that goes a little over 2 miles north on the PCT that has like all of the things that you always see on TV and on, you know, features about Yellowstone. So you definitely need to do that part too. So you'll have to do another extra 2 to 3 miles north and then come back. So it'll be a little bit over that 25 miles, but totally worth it. But with starting at the Heart Lake Trailhead, you'll go through several thermal areas. If you check out the comments on the water sources in Gut Hook, you'll find out what little creeks and streams are warm and that you can soak in. Definitely do not cross any of the barriers that say like, do not go in here or stay on trail, but there are some water sources that are warm and safe to soak in. I think my favorite geyser that I saw in this stretch in Yellowstone is the Lone Star Geyser. It beats Old Faithful in my opinion by far, just by the amount of water that comes out and how violent it is. I don't know, it's just awesome. I really enjoyed the Lone Star Geyser. I sat there and ate my breakfast, some Fruit Loops while I watched it erupt, and it was just unlike anything I had ever seen before. Old Faithful is definitely cool, but you're gonna have more folks around you while you're watching that. So if you're not big into the touristy stuff, I mean, I realize Yellowstone is definitely a touristy place, but the Lone Star Geyser isn't gonna have as many folks because you have to walk a little ways to get there, while Old Faithful, you're gonna have a crowd of people around you. But I really enjoy both of those situations. It was really fun to see everybody, you know, cheer as if Old Faithful had put on this performance and needed applauded. I don't know, it's just funny when people cheer when the sun sets, or people cheer when a geyser erupts, because it's just a natural thing, and we're all in awe of it, but we're used to, you know, cheering for people when they perform, so it's almost as if we personify these natural occurrences. And in this stretch, you might also get to see some grizzlies, and I truly loved this section. I think it was the most intriguing for me as far as science goes and natural wonders along the whole trail. But this is something that you definitely need to plan in advance for, because these campsites fill up quickly, because Yellowstone is a sought after place to be. For this section, you can fly into West Yellowstone Airport. It's about an hour from Old Faithful Village. As far as getting around in the park though, this was one of the most problematic areas that I had for that. But if you have a partner with you and you have 2 vehicles that you can park at the 2 different trailheads, that would work out. From what I understand, there is no in-park shuttle service, but there might be some opportunities for hire. While poking around on Google, I did find one potential shuttle service, but there is a listing of some other tour buses and such that I'll put in the video description. Again, there's always the old thumb. A lot of the national park employees will pick you up. In fact, if somebody does pick you up, that's probably who it's gonna be. So if you are gonna rely on hitchhiking, just make sure that with your designated camping areas and having to camp at certain places on certain days, that you start in plenty of time and expect it to take you a couple hours to hitchhike. Now let's talk about a couple of sections along the Appalachian Trail. I've actually already highlighted two areas that I really loved along the AT, one in Vermont and one in Virginia in the Tinker Cliffs, McAfee Knob area. I'll put links to those videos in the video description below, and also links to a lot of the other stuff I've talked about today. But the first section I want to talk about on the AT is from Damascus at mile 470.7 to Mount Rogers National Recreational Headquarters at mile 534.1, for a total of 63.4 miles. What I would recommend, if you do like the trail community and you want to be around some thru hikers and kind of get a feel for that culture, you can start this section during the Trail Days celebration that's held at Damascus every year. And it's about the time that the big thru hiking bubble will be coming through Damascus around mid-May. So you can hang out for a few days, see some vendors, eat some good food, and camp out in Tent City. And then when the celebration is over, head northbound with all of the thru hikers who are also leaving out at the same time. Some of the best parts of this section to me are White Top Mountain. I remember just kind of a grassy open area that reminded me of The Sound of Music. Of course, every open area kind of reminds me of that. You know, you just kind of want to twirl around. And then Mount Rogers, which is a little side trail that's about a half mile up to the highest point in Virginia. Unfortunately, there aren't any views from there, but if you're into bagging some of those high points of the different states, then that's something you can knock off of your list while you're there. Thomas Knob Shelter is in this stretch, which in my opinion has one of the prettiest views from the shelter. Then you'll pass through the Grayson Highlands and get to see all of the wild ponies, and they'll want to lick your legs to get the salt and eat your trekking poles, so just be careful because they might run off with some of your gear. And then just before you finish at mile 534.1 is Partnership Shelter, where you can have a pizza delivered to the shelter. I kid you not. I just remember thinking to myself when I went through this area on my thru hike that I had to come back one day, and I still haven't yet, but I'm gonna. For travel, you can fly into the Tri-Cities airport, and in less than an hour you can be in Damascus. Then when you get to the northern point in this section, you can arrange for a shuttle with Mount Rogers Outfitters. They do shuttles for up to 100-mile radius, and they're based in Damascus. So you're definitely within range there, and you can come on back to your vehicle that's waiting for you in Damascus and then head on back to the airport. The last area I want to briefly mention today is the White Mountains in New Hampshire. I feel like people don't know how versatile and accessible that area really is, because between Hanover and Gorham, New Hampshire, you really cannot go wrong. You could go up to Mount Washington for the day and just walk around. You could start on a trail below the summit of Mount Washington and hike up. You can actually ride a cog to the top also. The Presidential Range is gorgeous, so you could go out for a stretch just doing the Presidential Range. You can do a couple of days or up to a week. There are a lot of shuttle services in the area, and even your camping can be versatile. You can do backcountry camping, although it is difficult to find a good camping spot in the Whites that's within legal camping, or you can stay at the AMC huts and pay for a bunk each night. So you could do a hike staying at a series of those different huts that feed you dinner at night and breakfast in the morning. So there are just all sorts of different options, and it's something that I certainly recommend if you've never been to the White Mountains. I think you're definitely missing out because they have something for everybody there. All right, y'all, well, those are some of my favorite sections on the Triple Crown Trails that I think that could be whooped in a week-ish or so, again, depending on your experience and your pace. If you have any sections that you've done either on the AT, PCT, and or CDT, then feel free to leave that in the comments below. If you just loved that particular area, the more details you can include, the better, just so folks have an idea of, you know, good ways to travel to and from these sections and the highlights of those particular sections. If you found this video useful, be sure to subscribe before you go. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see y'all next time.